Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
Just found out I'm being oppressed. I saw it on CNN, a white lady said it. Nobody knows black struggle like white women. And I thought I was having a good life until I got basic cable.
Good morning. It's Thursday, Jordan Peterson Thursday, October the 30th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Jordan Peterson. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you, Maria, then Stu.
A stock like Meta, after reporting its numbers last night, down sharply. Your reaction to all those earnings?
Interestingly enough, the fact that the market's down right now, after we structured a trade deal with China, shows me that investors are more concerned about the AI narrative right now. And, unfortunately for some of these stocks, we are now dealing with a more discerning investor who no longer appreciates reckless spending on AI, but rather disciplined spending on AI. So if you're a company and you are overspending, you're getting punished right now. If you're not overspending and you're doing it in a very disciplined manner, your stock goes up. At the end of the day, I think these pullbacks are viable. I think the bull market still has a lot of room to run.
Yeah, we'll see about that. We've got the billions and the hundreds of billions moving into AI. I keep asking when we're actually going to see the ROI there, the return on investment. Maybe that's also what investors are thinking about. Mark Tepper, David Avella, great to be with you both. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow. Varney and Company picks it up now. Stu, take it away.
Hey, good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. President Trump has announced he has a deal with China. The U.S. cut stiff tariffs on Chinese products from 57 to 47%. China cracks down on the trade in chemicals used to make fentanyl. China erases or eases restrictions on rare earths exports. China promises to buy, as the president says, tremendous amounts of U.S. soybeans. Trump pumped up the deal. On his way back on Air Force One, he said on a scale of 1 to 10, the meeting was a 12. He made a dramatic statement as well. The U.S. will begin testing nuclear weapons for the first time since 1992. To the markets, investors not happy with Fed Chair Powell. He says a rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion. The Dow will be off about 200 points at the open, the Nasdaq down 173. Here are the three big-name tech stocks that reported late Tuesday. Meta, that is way down. Microsoft is down $13. That amounts to 2.5%. But Google, that is way up, a gain of 7.5%. The big winner there is Google. The 10-year Treasury yield, 4.11. It's going up. The 2-year Treasury yield, 3.61, 64. It's going up. Bitcoin down to $109,000, 108.3 right now. Oil, $60 a barrel or thereabouts, 59.77. And gas, $3.03 per gallon on average nationwide. And the shutdown, well, it is about to hurt a lot of people. Food stamp benefits dry up this weekend. All branches of the military will miss their paychecks tomorrow. Tempers rising. A furious Senator John Thune points at the Democrats and says, it's your fault. Maybe the pain will bring an end to the Schumer shutdown. New York facing the likelihood of a socialist mayor. A new poll puts Zoran Mandami 10 points ahead of his closest challenger. That's too big a gap to close. The election is only 5 days away. This is a very nervous city. Thursday, October 30th, 2025.
And that was Stuart Varney. First, a little bit of Maria, then Stuart. Nonprofit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Candice.
Après, arrêtez de faire les cancres. J'en ai marre de recevoir des mails où on m'envoie son talisman. On me dit, il est éclatant quand je l'ai reçu. Je comprends pas. Maintenant, il est en train de se noircir, en train de s'allumer. C'est normal. J'ai déjà dit, c'est écrit sur le site internet. Ils sont beaux, d'accord, mais à la base, c'est des talismans kabbalistiques. Il faut qu'ils travaillent, il faut qu'ils s'abîment. S'ils s'abîment pas, c'est que vous avez pas d'âme. C'est pas compliqué. Donc, arrêtez de faire les cancres. Si je voulais faire de l'or massif, j'aurais fait de l'or massif. Si j'ai fait de laiton, c'est parce que ça doit prendre. C'est pas compliqué. Donc, vous êtes là, vous pensez à pas bouger. Ce n'est pas qu'un bijou. C'est un talisman kabbalistique, je l'ai déjà dit. Donc, allez voir les informations sur le site internet de quoi ils servent. Au lieu de me dire, ça abîme pas, mais il faut que ça s'abîme. C'est pas compliqué. Celui-là est en train de s'abîmer. Et Dieu merci. Et je le brûle à toute balle. Avant de vous l'envoyer déjà, avant d'envoyer le mantra de prédiction, je vous le brûle. Donc c'est normal que l'être est noirci, ça peut noircir devant, ça peut noircir derrière. Tout est normal, mais tout est écrit sur le site internet. Donc ça me rend malade. Bon, donc moi je l'ai mis sur ça. Normalement vous n'avez pas le droit de le mettre, mais moi je devrais faire ce que je veux. C'est pas compliqué.
And that was Candice Atias on the Instagram account. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Giorgia Meloni.
Presidente, cosa presenta questa riforma della giustizia e cosa risponde all'ANM per la quale altera l'assetto dei poteri?
Penso che la riforma della giustizia rappresenti un'occasione storica di avere una giustizia più efficiente e più giusta. Sono norme di buon senso, separazione delle carriere che significa rafforzare la terzietà del giudice, quindi un processo più giusto, alta corte disciplinare che significa che quando un giudice domani dovesse sbagliare se ne assumerà anche finalmente la responsabilità, e il sorteggio dei componenti del CSM, che vuol dire liberare la magistratura dalle correnti politicizzate e quindi valorizzare il merito. Non sono d'accordo con l'ANM, del resto, guardi, a memoria io non ricordo una volta in cui l'ANM sia stata favorevole a una qualsiasi riforma della giustizia, quindi la loro idea è che tutto va benissimo, non è l'idea che ne abbiamo noi della giustizia e probabilmente neanche quella che ne hanno i cittadini.
Ora si apre la partita del referendum, sarà una consultazione sulla giustizia o ci saranno anche dei profili politici?
No, io credo che debba essere una consultazione sulla giustizia, intanto perché non ci saranno in ogni caso conseguenze per il governo, lei parla del referendum ovviamente. Noi arriveremo alla fine della legislatura, chiederemo agli italiani di essere giudicati per il complesso del lavoro che abbiamo fatto, ma anche perché voglio ricordare a tutti che i governi passano e invece le leggi, soprattutto quelle costituzionali, rimangono e incidono sulla vita dei cittadini. Quindi io penso che sia una scelta più facile. Chi pensa che nella giustizia va tutto bene voterà contro la riforma, quindi voterà no. Chi pensa che invece possa migliorare voterà a favore della riforma e quindi voterà sì.
Presidente, come giudica lo stop della Corte dei Conti sul ponte sullo Stretto? Cosa farà il governo e come replica la magistratura contabile che dice sostanzialmente di essersi attenuta a profili esclusivamente giuridici?
Guardi, alla magistratura contabile voglio dire che sono rimasta francamente un po' incuriosita di fronte ad alcuni rilievi, come quello nel quale ci si chiedeva per quale ragione avessimo condiviso una parte della documentazione via link, perché verrebbe voglia di rispondere perché c'è internet. Dopodiché il governo aspetta i rilievi, risponderà ai rilievi, sia chiaro che l'obiettivo è fare il ponte sullo Stretto di Messina, che è un'opera strategica, sarà un'opera ingegneristica unica al mondo, perché voglio dire anche questo, noi siamo eredi di una civiltà che con i suoi ponti ha meravigliato il mondo per millenni e io non mi rassegno all'idea che non si possa più fare oggi perché siamo soffocati dalla burocrazia e dai cavilli.
Un punto sulla manovra: ci saranno modifiche sul contributo delle banche o sugli affitti brevi?
Sul contributo delle banche non credo, io continuo a dire che secondo me è un bel segnale che si mettano le risorse sui lavoratori, sulle imprese che assumono, sulle famiglie, sulla natalità, sulla sanità e che si chieda un contributo a banche e assicurazioni. Sugli affitti brevi, a mio avviso, deve decidere il Parlamento se confermare o meno la norma. Io voglio solamente dire che la ratio del provvedimento non è fare cassa sul tema degli affitti, ma è favorire gli affitti alle famiglie, perché è evidente che se c'è la stessa tassazione per chi affitta a un turista e per chi affitta a una famiglia, si tende.
And that was Georgia Meloni. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now some motivation.
Some people, y'all start losing and you just stop playing. You just like, I give up, I quit, we already lost.
And so you let it go. And you settle for the status quo. You settle for the easy road. You settle for, oh well.
But here's the thing. There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that's less than the one you're capable of living.
Greatness is a lot of small things done well. Day after day, workout after workout, obedience after obedience, day after day. You think you're just going to change the game. You're just going to change the rules. It don't work like that. There's a standard to greatness and there's levels to this.
To get something you never had, you have to do something you never did.
And some of you right now, you are where you are, you're giving 60% when you have 120 in you. There are those of you with a big dream but a little grind. I need you to pick your grind up. I need you to pick your grind up. There's nothing wrong with your dream. You have a great dream. But your grind does not affect your dream. And I need you to wake up every single day, and I need you to use your 24 hours like you've never used it before. You gotta get tired of losing. You don't belong at the bottom, and it's time for you to get your butt from down there. It's time for you to stop being comfortable at the bottom. Get your butt up. Get you're supposed to do. Live like you're supposed to live. I made a decision. Enough is enough. It's showtime. And your grind has to match your dream. You can't play as much as you used to play. You can't go where you used to go. You can't do what you used to do. And now you gotta push your grind up to match your dream. You're still fighting people. You're still cussing folk out. You're still laying hands on people. That's the easy fight. Now fight your bad habits. Fight your addictions now. Fight your laziness. Fight your procrastination. Take that energy now and fight to get a degree. Fight to start a company. Fight. Use that energy for something positive. And so while you're talking about your haters, it ain't your haters that's stopping you. It's you that's stopping you. You gotta go get it. It might take you more than 6 months. It might take you more than a year. It might take you more than 2 years. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care the sacrifice. You put in too many hours. You made too many phone calls. You put in too much money. You've invested too much time to quit now. You've given too much. You should have quit last year. You should have quit 2 years ago. You've come too far to give up. The only thing you can do right now is go all in. You got to create the type of scenario that if it doesn't work, you lose everything. And because you cannot lose everything, you got to make it happen. Put yourself in a position where you can't retreat, where it's do or die, sink or swim. Here's what you'll find out. You'll develop incredible swimming skill. You'll find yourself stroking unlike you've ever seen before. Through the inspiration of desperation, you'll become more creative than ever before. If you want to take the fucking island, burn your fucking boats, and you will take the island, because people, when they're going to either die or succeed, tend to succeed. You can't have that life until you're willing to put in that work. I need you to hustle until you no longer have to introduce yourself. I need you to work this business so hard that you don't have to convince anybody. I need you to work this business so hard that they begging you to get in. They begging to get on your team. They're begging to go on the road. I need you to hustle so hard. I need you to go in so hard that people start calling you and you don't have to call them. You owe it to yourself to give it your best effort. If you get in the habit of being mediocre or doing just enough to get by, you're not hurting anybody but you. You're cheating you. But you're giving 50% and you said it's not working. You're giving 60% and you said it's not working. Weak people who lose, they have bad happen to them. They say, well, I tried, I did my best. It was this guy's fault, it was my boss's fault, and they make all these excuses. And winners do not do that at all. They get punched in the face, they sit down for a second, and they say, F that. And they get back up and they keep going. I choose to perceive the difficult days as a test that has showed up to reinforce the belief that I have in myself, to reinforce what I know about myself. And if we all approach the difficult times like that and we continue to push through, our confidence will go up tremendously. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Yes. Yes, your life is worth it. It's time for you to unleash the beast. It's time for you to go inside and unleash that fire, unleash that purpose, unleash your passion. You got to make a commitment that you'll never ever give 60%. You'll never.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, let's not save the Dems this time. That's the title of an article by J.R. Dunn from The American Thinker.
As the clock ticks down the last days before the 2025 elections, we're hearing more calls for the GOP and conservatives in general to intervene in the NYC election to prevent Zoran Mamdani from being elected mayor. What we don't hear is an answer to the question of why. Why, exactly, should the GOP and the MAGA movement waste time, effort, and political capital to prevent the Democrats from throwing themselves off the cliff? Why write another chapter in the never-ending saga of Republicans pulling Dem chestnuts out of the fire and the getting kicked in the face immediately afterward? The plan here, evidently, is to switch GOP support to Andrew Cuomo. At least they've abandoned publicity hog and media hustler Curtis Sliwa in order to save the city from the evil Sheikh Mamdani. Think about that. Andrew Cuomo, brother of Fredo, who spent his 3 terms as governor plumbing new depths of incompetence. Who never let an opportunity to slander the GOP slide? Who during COVID pioneered the practice, then taken up by governors across the Northeast, of dumping COVID sufferers in old folks' homes, resulting hundreds, if not thousands of deaths. The Dems, so we're told, having come to their senses, will realize what the Republicans have spared them from and will be grateful. New York voters, with their customary insight and depth of perception, will reward the GOP with showers of votes. In other words, we'll witness something that has never happened and never will. What will happen instead is this. Voters will see the GOP tossing away the principles and practices of MAGA just as they were beginning to bear fruit. They will see conservatives supporting one virulent social democrat over another for no rational reason. They will see the Uni Party in action, and they will respond as they always have, by walking away. These fans of Andy the Granny Killer are missing the big picture. The Democrats are up against it. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands, are abandoning blue cities and states for redder pastures. Throw in various state GOP's adoption of aggressive redistricting tactics utilized by the Dems for generations, which will strip them of their last districts in red states. Add the upcoming Supreme Court decision in Louisiana versus Calais, which promises to end the Voting Rights Act provision that rewards the Dems with unearned racially defined districts, and the 2030 census that will further decimate Democrat representation. And it's clear that the Dems are on their way down the chute. But we're supposed to reach out and rescue them. Seriously? All this is in large part due to the loons that the Dems have been putting into office in recent years. The Squad, Bernie, Foxahontas, Jasmine Crockett. They may play well in their own blue-saturated localities, but they simply boggle the minds of voters in the rest of the country. In this election, they're running a man who actually wore the tattoo of the Totenkopf SS, one of the vilest organizations in human history. They've got him, and they've got Mamdani. The fear seems to be that Mamdani will suddenly transform into a new Obama, will shoot up the political ladder, enter the Oval Office, and further implement the destruction of the country. Well, he can't. Unlike Obama, he actually was born overseas, so he doesn't qualify. We can leave that out of our calculations. The impulse to save New York City doesn't play either. New York City doesn't want to be saved. This is the city that elected Bill de Blasio to 2 terms, in landslides, to boot. That sent Sandy to Congress. That has re-elected Chuck Schumer repeatedly. This is the city that had not one good word to say for Rudy Giuliani, the man who effectively destroyed the mafia's control of key city industries and who bought NYC an extra 20 years of life as mayor when he was targeted by the left. They've made their bed, and I wish them the joy of it. We all know the old adage, commonly attributed to Napoleon, to never interrupt when your enemy is in the process of destroying himself. The Democrat Party is perched atop a kitchen chair, noose around its neck, capering and gibbering as the chair teeters. Let it be.
And that was J.R. Dunn. Let's not save the Dems this time. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Jordan Peterson.
We often assume that people who behave in destructive ways are somehow immune to the emotional consequences of their actions, that their manipulations, their lies, their cruelty, it all bounces off the surface of their psyche without ever penetrating deeper. And in the case of narcissists, it's tempting to believe that. They project such an image of certainty, of invincibility, of unwavering superiority. They scoff at vulnerability, deny responsibility, and seem perpetually untouched by remorse. But this is an illusion. Beneath the surface, there's a storm of unacknowledged emotion, shame, guilt, confusion, all buried under layers of self-deception, so intricate that even they can't always trace their own steps, and they can't afford to. There's something deeply pathological about the way narcissists process guilt, if they even process it at all. You have to understand that guilt at its core is a marker of conscience. It's a signal that you've transgressed a boundary, that you've acted in contradiction to your values or moral structure. But here's the thing. Narcissists often don't operate on a traditional moral structure, not because they're inherently evil or sociopathic in a simplistic sense, but because their entire internal framework is built on a defensive architecture meant to prevent them from acknowledging their flaws. If you see yourself as deeply flawed and you've never developed the internal mechanisms to handle that realization, then guilt becomes a threat, not a call to grow, not a prompt to apologize, but a threat. So what do you do with a threat? You suppress it, you rationalize it away, or you project it onto others. This is where the denial mechanism kicks in. A narcissist can't face the fact that they've hurt someone and are responsible for it, because to do so would shatter the illusion they've built around their identity. And that illusion isn't a small thing, it's the scaffolding of their entire sense of self. So guilt becomes buried deep. It doesn't disappear, though. That's a critical point. It just gets layered over with denial, with blame, with justification. They made me do it. They're too sensitive. They're trying to control me. These are the phrases that buffer them from the crushing weight of accountability. And every time they lean into these narratives, they reinforce a fortress of self-deception. Now, this isn't to say that there's no internal conflict. On the contrary, the more they suppress guilt, the more psychological tension builds beneath the surface. It's like a fault line under pressure. And sometimes that pressure leaks out in strange ways, in outbursts of rage, in moments of inexplicable sadness, or in obsessive behaviors. Because you can't bury guilt forever without it manifesting somehow. Repressed emotions don't just vanish, they rot. And that rot seeps into everything. Their relationships become unstable, their perception of reality becomes distorted, and most importantly, their capacity for genuine intimacy erodes. Because intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires the willingness to admit wrongdoing, to express remorse, to repair damage. A narcissist trapped in denial can't do that. What's tragic about this is that guilt, while painful, is actually a path to redemption. It's not the enemy. It's the very thing that makes healing possible. But to the narcissist, guilt is equated with annihilation. They think, if I admit I'm wrong, if I admit I've hurt someone, then I'm nothing. That's the fragility at the center of narcissism. The ego isn't inflated because it's strong, it's inflated because it's weak. It's inflated to protect something that feels utterly inadequate. So the guilt gets shoved further down, and as it festers, it warps their behavior. They start gaslighting not just others, but themselves. They rewrite history. They become masters of selective memory. They tell themselves stories in which they're always the hero or the victim, but never the perpetrator. And here's where the danger lies. The people closest to the narcissist often bear the brunt of this suppressed guilt because it has to go somewhere. So it comes out as manipulation, as contempt, as passive aggression. It's like emotional fallout. And the more the narcissist hurts others to protect their fragile ego, the more guilt accumulates, which only reinforces the cycle. It's a loop, a psychological spiral that can go on for years, even decades, if never confronted. You might ask, well, can they ever break out of it? The answer is complicated. It depends on the depth of their self-deception and the extent of their suffering. Sometimes only immense psychological pain, loss, abandonment, existential crisis can crack that defensive shell and let the guilt in. And sometimes even that isn't enough, because once you've built your identity on the avoidance of guilt, confronting it feels like death. But make no mistake, the guilt is there. It's just buried under layers of armor and strategy. And you can often see glimpses of it in their quietest moments, when there's no one to impress, no one to manipulate. That's when the mask slips. That's when the inner conflict becomes visible, if only briefly. But they'll deny it, even to themselves. They'll snap the mask back into place and tell themselves another story. Because for them, the truth isn't just painful, it's dangerous. Shame operates as one of the most fundamental psychological regulators of human behavior. It emerges early in development, often in response to disapproval or the threat of social exclusion. In a functional psyche, shame serves as a moral compass. It tells you when you've strayed from a code of conduct that fosters belonging, cooperation, and decency. But in the narcissistic structure, shame isn't integrated in a healthy or transformative way. It's seen not as an indicator of wrongdoing, but as a threat to the very self. This is because the narcissistic personality is structured around the avoidance of vulnerability. So shame, which by its nature requires one to acknowledge fault, is experienced as an existential danger rather than a moral prompt. Now consider how someone builds such a personality in the first place. Often, it's a consequence of early emotional injuries. Neglect, harsh criticism, inconsistent affection. These conditions don't cultivate self-worth in the traditional sense. Instead, the child begins to piece together a false self, one constructed around performance, superiority, and image. In such a framework, the authentic self, flawed, needy, uncertain, is buried. And anything that threatens to reveal that hidden, fragile self is rejected with extreme intensity. Shame, therefore, becomes intolerable. It's not just uncomfortable, it's annihilating. It's the reminder that there's something deeply wrong and that the illusion of control and perfection is just that, an illusion. When shame does appear, it's almost always redirected. The narcissist cannot metabolize it in the typical way, so it becomes rage, it becomes blame, it becomes cold withdrawal. If you confront them with evidence of their wrongdoings, you'll often be met with hostility, not because they believe they're innocent, but because your words have activated a well of buried shame that threatens to unravel their carefully maintained facade. In this way, the narcissist becomes a master of projection. They'll accuse you of being controlling, selfish, manipulative, precisely the traits they fear in themselves. Because to admit that those traits live within them would mean facing the unbearable truth that they are not the person they pretend to be. Now, this isn't just some abstract psychological curiosity. The consequences are devastating, especially in close relationships. The narcissist, unable to own their shame, unconsciously enlist others to carry it for them. This is often done through subtle and not so subtle tactics of emotional manipulation, gaslighting, shifting blame, invalidating feelings. Over time, their partner, child, or friend may begin to feel that they are the problem, that they are somehow always in the wrong, always needing to fix or justify themselves. This psychological displacement allows the narcissist to preserve their self-emotion while leaving a trail of emotionally damaged people in their wake. What's even more sinister is that the narcissist may not be aware that shame is driving them. The denial is so deep, so well practiced, that it becomes invisible even to them. But that doesn't mean the shame disappears. It festers beneath the surface, shaping their behaviors in ways they can't see. They may become obsessed with status, appearance, or control. They may oscillate between grandiosity and despair. And if their constructed identity is threatened by failure, rejection, or exposure, they may spiral into emotional chaos. Because without the mask, they don't know who they are. They've never developed the internal resources to confront their imperfections without collapsing into self-hatred. Sometimes you'll see the shame leak out, not through confession, but through moments of uncharacteristic silence or abrupt emotional withdrawal. It's like a glitch in the matrix, a split sec where the internal war becomes visible, but then it's gone. The defenses reassert themselves. The narrative is rewritten. They were tired. You were being unreasonable. The issue is dismissed, minimized. And in doing so, the narcissist fortifies the very walls that keep them from healing. The irony is that what they most need Acknowledgement of their flaws, a path to genuine remorse, is the one thing they are most incapable of permitting. You see, the fear of shame governs them far more than they're willing to admit. It's like a hidden tyrant pulling the strings from the shadows. They may claim strength, confidence, self-sufficiency, but beneath the surface lies a soul paralyzed by the possibility of exposure. And until that shame is confronted, not evaded, not displaced, but honestly reckoned with, they remain trapped in a prison of their own making. Not because they can't see the way out, but because the cost of stepping through the door feels like psychological death. So instead, they remain where they are, armoring themselves against a world they perceive as hostile, but which in reality is simply reflecting back the parts of themselves they've disowned. Vulnerability is not a weakness, at least not in the traditional sense. It is the necessary precondition for intimacy, trust, and authentic connection. But for the narcissist, vulnerability is equated with danger. It's a threat to their control, their self-image, their narrative, and so they hide it. They bury it under layers of defensiveness, arrogance, and manipulation. They do this not because they are inherently malicious, but because they've learned, often very early in life, that being vulnerable is unsafe. That if they show their true feelings, they will be hurt, abandoned, or rejected. And once that lesson is internalized, the entire structure of their emotional world starts to shift. They stop reaching out honestly. They stop admitting fear or sadness or guilt. And instead, they build an armor of certainty, dominance, and denial. But that armor doesn't erase the feelings. It only suppresses them. And what's suppressed doesn't disappear. It festers, it grows in the dark. So you end up with a person who outwardly seems untouchable, but who inwardly is governed by emotions they refuse to acknowledge. That inner world is chaotic. It's filled with insecurity, envy, shame, longing, rage. But because these emotions don't align with the identity the narcissist wants to maintain, they're either denied outright or projected onto others. This is why narcissists are often so reactive, why small criticisms provoke disproportionate responses, why they lash out when their image is even slightly threatened. The attack is not about the present moment. It's about protecting themselves from a feeling they cannot name. Now, this is important because it reveals a fundamental contradiction. The narcissist wants to be loved, admired, respected. They want closeness and validation. But the very things they do to maintain control, gaslighting, withdrawing, devaluing, destroy the possibility of genuine connection. And so they create the very loneliness they fear. They drive people away and then feel victimized by that very distance. They sabotage relationships and then tell themselves that no one is capable of understanding them. It's a tragic cycle, but one that makes perfect sense when you understand the emotional architecture they're operating from. They cannot afford to be seen as weak. They cannot afford to feel exposed. So they sabotage the very thing they need. In private, the narcissist is not as composed as they appear. The cracks show. They may not speak about it, but it shows in the way they distract themselves, in their compulsive need for stimulation, their obsession with status or appearance, their inability to sit in silence. When there's no one to impress, no performance to give, they are confronted with the parts of themselves they've disowned, and that confrontation is deeply uncomfortable. So they avoid it. They avoid it with television, with alcohol, with work, with sex, with control, anything that keeps them from having to look too closely in the mirror. But the problem is the more you run from something, the more power it gains. So their life becomes a series of strategies to keep the truth at bay. What is that truth? That underneath the bravado, there's a person who doesn't believe they are lovable, who doesn't believe they are enough. And rather than confront that belief and work through it, the narcissist tries to outpace it. They try to outperform their shame. They try to dominate their fear. But these strategies are ultimately unsustainable. So eventually the persona starts to falter, the cracks widen, and when that happens, the narcissist is faced with an emotional reckoning they're utterly unprepared for. That reckoning doesn't happen in public, it happens in solitude, it happens in the quiet hours, when there's no one left to impress and nowhere left to hide. That's when the truth surfaces. And for many, it's intolerable. This is why they lash out when they feel abandoned, why they go cold when they feel exposed, why they shift blame when confronted. Because to take ownership of their feelings would mean dismantling the very foundation of their self-concept. It would mean admitting that they are not in control, that they are capable of being wrong, that they have hurt others, and more frighteningly, that they are capable of being hurt themselves. This is not just a difficult admission, it's psychologically destabilizing. It threatens the internal coherence of their identity. And so they resist, not because they're evil, but because they're terrified, because in their mind, to be vulnerable is to be annihilated. So they guard their feelings like a fortress, unaware that it is this very defense that keeps them trapped. The concept of loss, particularly the loss of control, is profoundly destabilizing to a narcissist. At the root of their psychological structure is a compensatory need to maintain dominance over perception, how others perceive them, how they perceive themselves, and how reality itself seems to bend to their preferred narrative. That control is essential because it masks a kind of internal chaos, an unresolved dissonance formed long before they ever learned to manipulate or deceive. So when someone close to them, someone who once fed into that illusion of superiority, walks away, the narcissist is not simply experiencing rejection, they're experiencing collapse. Not externally at first, but internally, where the machinery of their false self begins to falter under the pressure of reality they cannot deny. They may act indifferent, they may pretend they don't care, but that performance is precisely what reveals the depth of the wound. It's not indifference, it's panic disguised as aloofness. The narcissist's identity is not stable, it is assembled, piece by piece, from external validation, admiration, submission. They need mirrors, and when a mirror, especially one that once reflected back to them an image of power, refuses to play along anymore, the illusion of control is shattered. And in that shattering lies the first real confrontation with the truth. They spend so much energy avoiding. They are not invincible. They are not immune to abandonment. They are not immune to pain. And worse, they can't force someone to stay simply through manipulation anymore. Now, once that realization hits, what follows is an emotional regression. Not regression in a childish sense, but in the psychological sense. The narcissist reverts to earlier coping mechanisms, denial, rage, projection. This is why they may lash out, suddenly idealize someone new, or start a smear campaign against the person who left. It's all an attempt to patch the hole in the ego. But the problem is, those efforts never address the root. They treat the symptoms, not the illness. And the illness is not the departure of another person. It's the narcissist's inability to confront their own inadequacy without collapsing under it. That collapse is private. Even though its effects ripple outward, they may become more volatile, more controlling, or paradoxically more withdrawn. But whatever the response, it is always an effort to restore a sense of self that has been damaged by the withdrawal of external validation. This is the paradox. The narcissist depends on the people they devalue. They rely on the affection of those they claim to be superior to. And when that affection is revoked, the emotional dissonance becomes overwhelming. Their conscious mind might say, good riddance, but their unconscious is screaming, what if they saw through me? What if I'm not who I think I am? And that's the core of the collapse. Not just that they lost control over you, but that you might have seen the truth they've been hiding, even from themselves. So what do? Often they attempt to rewrite the story. Not just for others, but for themselves. They might convince themselves, you were the unstable one, the ungrateful one, the cruel one. Because to admit otherwise would mean accepting their role in the unraveling of the relationship. And more than that, it would mean accepting that their emotional strategies, manipulation, guilt-tripping, stonewalling, didn't work. That someone could walk away from them, not because they failed to be charming enough, but because they failed to be real. That is unbearable to someone whose identity depends on appearing flawless. So they rewrite the story not out of malice, but out of necessity. It's psychological self-preservation at its most desperate. The tragedy is that in doing so, they forfeit the opportunity to grow. They could reflect. They could examine their patterns. But that would require admitting vulnerability. And for someone who's built their entire life around avoiding that very thing, the task feels insurmountable. So instead of change, they double down. They seek new sources of validation, new people to mirror back the illusion. But each time it happens, the cycle becomes more fragile, the illusion harder to maintain, because somewhere deep down, the narcissist knows the truth. They know that if they were truly whole, they wouldn't be this dependent on others for emotional survival. They wouldn't need control so desperately. They wouldn't be so destabilized when someone simply chooses to leave. And yet, rather than confront that awareness, they bury it deeper. They cover it with charm, status, or anger. But every time they are left, that hidden wound is touched again. And over time, even they start to notice the pattern. The inability to keep people close, the growing sense of isolation, the gnawing feeling that something is missing. They don't say it out loud, but it shows. It shows in the quiet moments when no one is around to impress. It shows in the way they look at themselves in the mirror when the mask slips, even for a moment. It shows in their restless pursuit of perfection, always just out of reach, always one step ahead of the emptiness they refuse to name. The fifth and final move that exposes a narcissist's deepest insecurity is rooted in the very thing they fear most: irrelevance. When you stop reacting, when you no longer give them the emotional fuel they crave, they are forced to confront a reality in which they do not matter as much as they desperately need to believe they do. This withdrawal of attention is not simply a passive act. It's a form of active disengagement that dismantles their illusion of omnipotence. For a narcissist, attention is oxygen, and when you deprive them of it, not out of spite, but out of a genuine movement toward independence, they start to suffocate. Most people misunderstand this kind of silence. They see it as avoidance, as weakness, but it's far from that. It's discipline. It's the refusal to be baited into another round of emotional chaos. It's the psychological equivalent of standing still while the storm passes through, rather than running into it. And the narcissist cannot stand it. They don't know what to do with your silence. They don't know how to respond to your lack of response, because everything they are has been constructed around the assumption that they can evoke a reaction, whether it's love, fear, guilt, or anger. That's the game. That's the trap. And when you step out of it, they lose their grip on you. Now, this isn't about ghosting or playing games or pretending to be above someone. It's about reclaiming your sense of peace. It's about not allowing your nervous system to be hijacked by someone who thrives on instability. And that terrifies them. Because if they can't pull you into their narrative anymore, then they're left alone with their own. And that narrative, as much as they try to glamorize or control it, is full of holes. It's full of unresolved guilt, of shame that's never been named, of fear that they might not actually be who they pretend to be. Your silence forces them to hear that inner voice they've spent their whole life drowning out with noise. They may react to this silence with escalation. They may push harder, provoke more, try to get under your skin in increasingly desperate ways. That's not because they've grown stronger. It's because they're losing control. It's because your refusal to play the game reminds them of a truth they cannot face, that they are not the center of the universe, and that you are no longer orbiting around their needs. The silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. It tells them that you found something they cannot offer: self-respect, peace, purpose. And that's devastating to someone who thought they were the source of your value. It's not just that they've lost control over you. It's that your disengagement signals something even more threatening, that they were never as important as they imagined. And if that's true about you, what does that say about everyone else? What does it say about the identity they've constructed, if it can be so easily dismissed by someone who once cared for them? That's the fracture. That's the crack in the foundation. And once it appears, it's almost impossible to unsee. They may try to cover it up with a new relationship, a new success, a new mask, but deep down, they remember. They remember that someone walked away, and that someone didn't come back. They may not talk about it, they may pretend they've moved on, but the insecurity doesn't vanish, it festers. It grows in the quiet spaces, in the absence of drama, when they're left alone with themselves. And no matter how much they try to distract or discredit or distort, they know. They know they were seen. And not just seen, but seen through. That's the most terrifying thing for a narcissist. To be known, not for the image they project, but for the manipulation, the fragility, the desperation behind it. Your silence tells them you saw it all. And more than that, it tells them it didn't work on you anymore. So the next time you think silence is weak, remember this. It takes strength to step back when everything in you wants to respond. It takes clarity to resist being drawn into chaos. And it takes courage to let go of needing to be understood by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. The narcissist doesn't fear your anger. They feed off it. What they fear is your absence, your refusal to engage, your steady, unwavering decision to live in peace, even if that means walking away from the noise. And when you do that, when you stand in that stillness, you shine a light on the one thing they've spent their life avoiding, the emptiness that follows when the manipulation fails.
And that was Jordan Peterson. And I keep thinking when he's talking, what I do is I substitute the word liberal for the word narcissist. And it all fits together perfectly. Think about it. Back in a minute. Charlie Kirk, rest in peace.